Welcome to Stacking Growth Call to Action, a show for the trailblazers, changemakers, and paradigm shifters. Each week, a different marketing hero who is called to make a change in their field will join us to walk through each step of their journey. They'll cover the highs, the lows, and what's coming next. Together, we'll help you find the changes needed for your own business to win. I'm Steph Graniola here with Evan Hughes, and today we're excited to welcome Refine Labs General Manager Judy Sheriff. Judy has led the Refine Labs team through their development of tangible, modern success metrics with the Refine Labs measurement framework. Judy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Steph. Thanks, Evan. Super excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to learn from you. I'm excited to get front row seat to this lesson. So let's dive right into it and start with your path into marketing and some of the experiences you've had with maybe more outdated measurement tools.
Hey, take a trip back in time with me to 2010. Set the scene. Um, I was My first foray into marketing came through an internship. It was a social media marketing internship when I was just graduating college. This was like really, I'd say, the forefront of social media marketing even being a thing. I was in a class in college where we had to make a Twitter account as one of our assignments. So, like just getting launched, I think we were just starting to figure out like monetization on Facebook. My internship was at a small B2C e-commerce company. It was like, help us build our social media presence and then also other things related to the internet. And like, if it's digital, it slowly headed into my realm. At the time, I was going to University of Washington, majoring in PR, and wanted to be a journalist. And this was like before journalism, I don't know, had changed so much digitally. And I just saw the internship was like, okay, this seems like something I could do. I'm into social media. This seems kind of fun. I feel like I need an internship. There's like pressure to figure out what I'm going to do after college. Um, I quickly found that actual social media management and like the posting of it all is not what I like. It's not where my skill sets are at. I'm much more funny in a one-to-one setting than I am in a one-to-many setting. But I really liked the data and the trackability of just digital marketing in general. And I was lucky this company was very open-minded to my sort of internship expansion, my role expansion. I got to set up our first like Google Analytics implementation, working with a developer. Um, Launched our first retargeting campaigns, figured out just sort of trial by error how Google Tag Manager worked. And like caveat, I had a developer helping me with that piece, but just Googling at the time, like, what do I need to track our e-commerce website? And that expanded into learning Drupal, which is the website that platform that it was built on, and managing the ecom website in terms of like new product launches. Um, I got hired after I graduated college into an online marketing coordinator role. So online marketing, I think, is what we were still calling it. It wasn't digital marketing yet. And this was really like I owned rev goals associated with the ecom website and then promotion of the products across really any digital channel. So we were always doing Google Ads, I was doing ad roll was really big. They just rolled out um, Facebook. We were doing a lot of promotions on Facebook. And I don't think at the time any other social media platforms were really monetizing. We were B2C, so I was not heavy focused in the LinkedIn world at that time. But I was very excited about how measurable everything felt. At the time, I think there was more of a stereotype around marketing that was like, oh, marketing's over here making posters and t-shirts. And, this was like hard number marketing. These revenue, I can show sales in Google Analytics tied to the campaigns that I've done. Like, this is really cool and really trackable. And I don't think I was really fully aware at the time that so much of it was new. I was 22, so I didn't know what I was doing. And then I was working with a consultant who ended up hiring me, and I moved into the B2B SaaS world after about 4 years in the ecom space. And honestly, never looked back. Going to B2B was the best shift career wise, as it's a lot easier to get companies to spend company money than it is to get individuals to spend their own money. And I was very much like SaaS boom at the time. There was a ton of funding going on in the Seattle tech world. The company was a MarTech software. It would tracked ad networks. It was like infrastructure for ad networks. So it was very, very technical, but I was marketing to marketers, which was really fun. And I started there similarly, like online marketing manager, demand generally. I owned paid media. I was managing our agency, running Google Ads. This is where I really started getting more into what channels work for B2B. There was more playing in LinkedIn, lots of um, lead gen. We were gating content. It was primarily ebooks, webinars, long form reports. We actually had like a researcher on staff who was doing really cool research reports, but all gated. Everything was a lead magnet, essentially, driving heavy top of funnel volume. I was trying to drive paid trial signups. So driving top of funnel content volume and then also looking at trials, how many trials are coming in each day. And it's interesting because I sort of had these two KPIs like MQLs, or it was like target account MQLs. We want the right job titles of the right people at the right companies. We were launching ABM for the first time. This is like the first wave of demand-based launching and sort of tools rolling out around ABM. And so I was trying to bring in a lot of these good fit people. My lead scoring model was so tight. I had the best setup in Marketo. It was like every attribution software was there. I had lean data. There was campaigns for everything. But then on the flip side, like what was actually bringing in revenue for the company was this trial motion that was up at 30-day paid trial. We were trying to convert as many of those to revenue as possible. And like most of these were coming from organic or direct. It didn't have, sometimes they were coming from paid search. It was pretty trackable. And depending on the sort of region, we could get a lot of response in paid search, really cheap leads, particularly like Eastern Europe or in India. We were driving a ton of volume there. We were a global company. Um, and so I don't know, I did this for a few years before I realized that they just didn't link. We were running all these tactics and campaigns and promotions to bring in leads. Um, that we're not actually ever signing up for these trials. And I think we would see long sales cycle deals for big companies that did have multiple touch points of content downloads and events and all these different, things that they did. But ultimately, this is over months of time converting through a sales rep. Like those were really long sales cycles. When we saw fast, high volume, it was like organic direct trials, not a lot of marketing touches ahead of time. How do we get more of those? Um, I think that's like the background and what led me to, uncovering that I feel like there was more to how we're measuring marketing and what we're doing. And I was really right about the time in my career where I was ready to leave that company as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm ready for the next thing. I've been here 6 years. I feel like I want to do something new. And then COVID hit and I got laid off. So I didn't have to try to look for something else. I was forced to look for something else. And I think at the time, Chris Walker had just launched his podcast, like end of 2019. This was spring 2020. I'd been following him on LinkedIn, so we were connected there, and he'd been posting a lot of things that resonated with what I'd been observing in terms of what I was measuring versus what was actually driving revenue for the company. And that's really what, enticed me to come here was I wanted to work with some companies who were, is what we would say now, thinking about it as the demand creation strategy or more of a modern demand generation approach compared to a lead generation approach.
That's awesome. Yeah, I wanted to get into that a little bit more, to that kind of defining moment of that pivotal shift where you're like that and something needs to change. And I know you kind of alluded to it through some of your different roles and responsibilities and kind of seeing as the evolution, because the intersection of e-com and B2B, right? Everything was supposed to be measurable because that's just how we defined our marketing success is based off of numbers and metrics. But seeing that like inbound buying experience was evolving, and the whole direction that B2B was taking, the lead gen motions and stacking leads, but those not converting to pipeline. I think it was a moment of inflection for all of us in the space too, of kind of that aha. But yeah, talk the audience a little bit through about what was that time where you knew you had to change this, and kind of redefining a new measurement was the only approach forward.
Yeah. Yeah. I can like specifically remember this meeting. I think it was a leadership meeting, and one of our C levels was looking at our metrics, and looking at trial volume and asking me, like, how do we get more organic trials? I want more of these. I think we had one up on the screen where we were looking at their lean data, like attribution history and its flow of like website visit, website visit, website visit, form conversion, started free trial. Like, how do we get more of these? And this was coming off of the heels of cutting our events budget, cutting anything that was a branded spend that was not directly either attributed to something I could tie to a trial sign up like paid search, or something that could be tied to like MQL goals related to target accounts. And if we were bringing in target account contacts at the time. And I just remember feeling like in that meeting that everything we just cut and all the budget decisions that we'd made did not support driving more organic trials. And I remember going to our VP of marketing and being like, I don't know how to like fully articulate this, but like organic is driven through recognition of our brand, and we need to be sponsoring some of these like happy hours alongside of events. We still need to have a presence here. No one's gonna come search for us if they don't know about our brand name. I had a lot of support from the marketing leader, but the board was looking for specific numbers. C-level was looking for specific numbers. They couldn't go back to the board and say, we want spend that we can't show anything attributed against. And this was 2019, and I would say I still see that conversation a lot with our clients now, with companies that I'm working with. So I think that has not yet been solved, but I do think we've done a good job of moving in the right direction. And that was really the moment for me where I thought, this is broken. We're not doing this right, and I wanna fix it.
Did you see a direct correlation when you guys kind of paused the events, paused the brand initiatives, where organic inbound actually was tapering off, or was it kind of that like flat line? That's where some of the conversations come in our play, because there's not enough time to prove out that it's actually impacting us long term, because satisfaction in 30 days is like, oh, it's still stable, so we should maintain this.
Yeah. It's a good point. There was a slow trajectory of decreasing trial volume, so it was not as clear of like, cut this huge dip. We did see that happen with paid search though. We cut paid search really heavily and dropped organic trial volume by like 15%. It was like they were influenced by search, but they weren't tracked as paid search for whatever reason because of cookies, session timing, all of these reasons that we know don't always store appropriately. So that was interesting. But it was not as like sort of tight of a timeline to be able to really make that correlation. And I also like I didn't know what I know now. Now I would go back in with so much more data and another 6 years of experience talking about these things, and like look at the conversions over time, I'd look at blended cost pers in a different way. There's just a different sort of like lens I would use on those metrics. I didn't know what I was doing at the time. So I was conditioned to measure in a certain way. And the way I was measuring like did make my job easier. Like, it was not that hard to hit these MQL goals if I had a good targeting and we had a good content. It's just that then they didn't actually want to buy our software.
Yeah, that's the kicker, right? There's not the revenue component. So you kind of joined the mindset of measurement framework is kind of evolving. You need to position it differently. You followed Chris Walker, kind of got into that world around 2020, joined us. And then, like you said, is that what I heard? Like working with clients is like the directly, like where you got to see multiple problems or multiple individuals having the exact same problem in conversation.
Yeah, definitely. So I think I first went in like a little naive, like, great, everybody that wants to work with us knows that Refine Labs does it this way. So they're ready to like make this shift. I'm sure they're going to be totally down to ungate all their leads. We're not even going to measure MQLs. Like, we vetted them in the sales process. There's philosophical alignment. Like, we're good. And that was true for, multiple champions across client accounts. There's usually somebody that was very bought in and pushing like the change maker internally wanting this, but uh, it's easier said than done to get people to move away from, it's not even just attribution, because we still like want to look at attribution, but it's just looking at it like more holistically and not only what is attributed to paid, and understanding the way your marketing dollars influence your organic and your direct and really like that holistic inbound funnel, and not only what is going to be attributed to a specific paid channel. But I think so not everybody was ready to make that shift. We really had to stair step the approach. And we still see this today with companies that we're working with. People kind of enter at different levels of readiness and maturity to start shifting their measurement and focusing on demand creation. But I also noticed just so many gaps in general across most of the companies that we work with as it relates to their infrastructure and their measurement. So even just outside of like, how are we measuring it? It's a lot of basics that are still like consistently we'll find gaps in infrastructure with the bulk of companies that we're working with. And so it's been interesting to uncover like, what is the most sort of like foundational level things that companies should need to implement to be able to start to shift their measurement this way. And so some of it is more tactical, and then some of it is like leadership alignment, mindset alignment, getting the buy-in from the people that actually are going to control your budget and look at the end result.
That's a real, I think, benefit that I don't hear a lot about agency life is being able to see those patterns emerge across so many different companies. And you can start to connect the dots a little bit more easily when you have seen it in so many different places in the same way.
Yeah, totally.
So, when you're getting started, you have all of this experience and all of these years, and you say you would go back and you would start it differently, but you got yourself here. And what were some of the tools that helped? So, obviously, your view on things now and the tools that you're using now have evolved, but what would be your recommendations for someone who is in that advanced stage, but also maybe someone who's just getting started on their own journey here?
I wish this is going to be a shameless plug here for us, but I wish that I'd had something like the Vault and just some of the content that we've outlined there related to infrastructure when I was getting started. A lot of what I was doing was Googling and reading forums, reading HubSpot forums, Marketo forums, user groups, um, you networking, chatting with people with marketing ops backgrounds. Marketing ops is sort of my secret love. I like demand gen too, but I was marketing ops lead for a while at my previous company and administered our Marketo system. And I think I had a really tight relationship with our sales ops leader, our sales force administrator, and having that partnership and really getting into the weeds and understanding how the CRM functions is just crucial. I don't feel like any marketer could know too much about marketing ops. Like you can't it would not hurt to
So true.
go more into the weeds on marketing ops, just to understand how your systems talk to each other, how the data syncs, where data is coming from, and how it flows through. Because I think all companies are going to be reporting revenue to some degree, and all of that is going to be impacted by like the initial entry point of revenue or of data into your system. But now, because there's more documentation specifically out there, I think we've done a good job outlining some of the core things that you need within your infrastructure as it relates to, even just like the basics of sort of tracking from a campaign perspective, starting with your ads. When someone clicks from an ad to your website, are your UTMs storing? Are they there? Are you able to capture those into the form in your marketing automation system? Are those going to map into your Salesforce or your CRM? I think we've done some good outlining, like tactically as well, in terms of if you want to map data all the way through from sort of that initial conversion point, let's say it's a demo request, to closed won revenue. How do you set your system up so that it flows from that primary contact or the contact who's making that request all the way through to that opportunity? The requiring of contacts on ops is something that maybe 10% of the companies that I've worked with here are actually doing. And a lot of companies need to implement that or don't have a good way of consistently ensuring that people data is passed through to the revenue. And that is a big gap from a measurement standpoint. Um, I think some of the things like how did you hear about us and the hybrid attribution that we talk about was no, I would have laughed at that when I was at my previous company and I
Same.
was attribution. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna just survey them. Like I trust them to tell me real info. Like I and now I look through, over the years, hundreds of clients' data sets, and we get so much interesting info from there. And people do tell you details, like not even just the channel maybe they heard you on, but they'll type in details about the ad or a specific podcast that you were referenced on. Or now it's really interesting seeing things like Chat GPT coming up in there, or Claude or other AI tools that are showing up. So I think some of these things is just like the market maturing and coming along with us. It's a little bit more accepted now, the self-reported attribution. I see back in 2020 when we'd sign with a new company, basically no one would have that implemented. And now I'd say 3/4 of the companies we work with come in with that implemented. So that's been a cool shift to see. I know that wasn't the question, but I just tangented off of it because it reminds me of how much has actually changed in the last 6 years as it relates to measuring demand gen, particularly I think in that B2B SaaS space where there's kind of the LinkedIn, I don't want to say echo chamber, but the LinkedIn realm that is repeating a lot of these same ideas over and over again. I guess that is an echo chamber.
Just a quick thing on the SRA though. Yeah, everybody, not everybody, but there's a lot of individuals that push back, right? Our audience doesn't input information that is helpful for us to make any sort of sound decisions. And then if we do an analysis, right, and we see on average, let's say 10% of their inbound has some sort of qualitative useful feedback, that to me tells me that's much better than like just your direct attribution that you would measure success of that based off of inbound, organic, SEM. So even those small wins, right? Yeah, it might not be the bulk of it, and you might not have the perfect story where, especially marketers to marketers, they know kind of what the expectation is on that SRA field. So I feel like we're a little bit more open to typing out everything, but I always want to make that plug. Like even the smallest wins, 10% of your total inbound can be super valuable to have that sort of information.
Yeah. My favorite is to see the inputs that you get when you market to like a super technical audience, like developers, or it's very to the point. It's a little bit abrupt, sometimes a little bit like, I don't want another field here. And sometimes it's like, I was on this Linux user group and this specific topic came up and it's like so detailed. And it's really interesting to see just how that varies across sort of ICPs and audiences that you're talking to.
For sure. I love it. So we talked a little bit like the SRA, and then Steph had such a good question kind of around the tools. Dashboards, right? That's a conversation that a ton of people like bring up. How do you think about that, or how should we think about that from like this new kind of, not new anymore, but like this different way of measuring success?
Yeah. As you know, we have a lot of opinions on dashboards that we're building in CRM for with the companies that we work with. And I think really it comes down to looking at that holistic inbound funnel. I mentioned this before. We don't want to only see what is attributed from a attribution software standpoint to your paid channels. I want to see anything that's coming from inbound. So I want to look at, let's just say demos. Sometimes it's trials. We'll use a demo example for this. I want to see total demo volume by month. And I wanted to see this from direct, organic, anything attributed to paid. I would exclude events and outbound and partnerships, something that I know are definitely not heavily influencing through our paid digital. Although I would be interested in viewing those pipeline sources separately, which we could talk about after. But for our kind of core inbound pipeline source, holistic demos, volume by month, how many of those are converting into meetings booked. This is a gap that I see a lot of companies not tracking this well. Definitely recommend having a timestamp on the date the meeting was held so that you can track meetings by actual date that they occurred. Then are those meetings turning into opportunities? Total ops, qualified ops, closed ops, both lost and won. And then I want to look at things like win rate and how is that trending over time, sales cycle, how is that trending over time, ACV, and how is that trending over time. And ideally, for a lot of people, a lot of companies are wanting to have bigger ACVs moving up market. And ideally, if you're running a good demand creation strategy where you are really focused on getting in front of that ICP, putting the core message out there in the market, knowing that they're going to probably come back and convert on an organic or direct channel, but they're ready to talk to sales at that point in time. Typically, we see higher win rates, shorter sales cycles, bigger ACVs when this is functioning well. I do like to look at then sort of another layer down of particularly on the demand capture piece. So like Google search or Bing and Microsoft ads. What is attributed? What do we see attributed to the paid channels and have that lens, but always be looking at the holistic, how does it impact a direct and organic alongside your paid channels? And then the sort of cost efficiency piece of it, this is typically less like in the actual Salesforce dashboard and usually, calculated externally, but really looking at your ad spend against a blended number of conversions or your high intent conversions against blended. I was just working with a company a couple weeks ago where we were looking at data of like just what is attributed to their paid channels and the trends, and then got visibility for the first time into organic and direct and saw like just a direct exact correlation with huge spike in ad spend, huge spiking trend in that same month for organic and direct conversion. So that's sort of I guess the 101 version of it. This would be like a Salesforce dashboard or a CRM dashboard. And then if you have the how did you hear about us field implemented, definitely recommend we layer in a version that's looking at sort of attribution source against how did you hear about us source, and particularly for direct and organic, what values are showing up there. We typically recommend that you're creating your how did you hear about us field, but also a categorization field that's going to be easier for reporting, and set up some automation in the back end that's like, if how did you hear about us contains LinkedIn, LI, LinkedIn with a space, LinkedIn ads, like any of those variations, or maybe you want to include meta ads, Facebook, Instagram, and you roll it all up to a social media, or you roll it all up to Google if it's any sort of variation of. You'll see Google, you'll see search, you'll see web search, you'll see internet search, internet research. There's kind of all these different values that come in. And so sort of, I'd say a bonus best practice dashboard is you also have reports that look at the SRA piece on the top of your full funnel.
Yeah, I love it. Overthinking and complicating dashboards is like the biggest root to any sort of failure in a marketing role. And I've experienced that where I just am looking at too much and there's too many data points to try to infer some sort of pattern or qualitative trend. And I think just kind of isolating around the core opportunity here is like each layer of that. Am I driving those demos to your point, right? Sure. Okay. Then what I'm doing is working. What are those costs per around that? And then like working your way, like just simplifying and mapping out like what are the data points you tell your leadership team, I think is a good starting point. You can know the stuff behind the scenes, but that shouldn't be like executive visibility because that just clogs and gets things a bit more confusing. And I love the framework of simplification for that.
A great summary. I should have been a little more succinct.
No.
No, it was great.
Learning a ton here. And, I think it's a, I don't know, Steph, any other questions related to tools too, before we kind of jump forward?
No, I mean, I think that's the biggest takeaway for me is making sure that it's not overcomplicating what you actually need and what you're actually going to use. And some of that takes time to know what you're going to implement after the fact, to backtrack to make sure your tools are streamlined. But it's just an important reminder.
Like easier said than done. We know there's some large enterprises where it's like, I say this, but then you also need to do that dashboard for every business unit and also for every geo, and then you need to compare those. So you've given, your size of your company, it may not be as straightforward, but it's still a good starting point.
Yeah. Pilot it on the side, and then once you prove it out to be effective, then kind of champion upstream. I think is the most important thing there. But definitely a journey. I mean, it sticks to me that your Twitter handle, like being the first, creating that first account, that's like back in Gmail back in the day. It's just like, you never know what you're going to land on, but the evolution of your journey.
Gmail, where you had to be invited to use Gmail. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm aging myself.
We're all old. Look at that.
We're all wise.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll take that. But no, it's fascinating to think about, and you share this with almost everybody we talk to during these discussions about your journey into marketing, and the path that you got here is so different. But I think there's like a lot of positives to take away from the experience and kind of the evolution and stepping into B2B. But I think it's also, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about like, what was the lowest point? What was like the shit moment where you were like, I'm done, but I'm going to keep pushing forward? Any sort of like failures or mishaps that you can share with the audience, I think is helpful for us to just relate, because honestly, we all fuck up.
Yeah, for sure. I think I maybe already, alluded a little to it. Probably the lowest point of my overall career is like COVID layoff, because it was a stressful time and you're getting, who wants to get laid off? But blessing in disguise in a lot of ways, because it did bring me here. And this was like a career changing company for me. I think low point was entering. So low point is layoff. Low point with this like shifting to this strategy and working here at Refine Labs and sort of trying to drive this message forward, was definitely operating under the assumption that companies were more ready than they are to make this shift, and going all in on a strategy that, pulled volume from a team of SDRs that was expecting leads every week, and we stopped gating these core assets, and suddenly they had no leads, and these SDRs are coming to the marketing lead, and the marketing lead's coming to me being like, I know I told you that was fine, but actually, like, we need to roll this back. Nobody's ready. And I think that really caused us to just pivot, our entire approach with how we are kind of slowly phasing this strategy into companies, and sort of assessing their readiness during the beginning of our engagements, or, for companies, people that are maybe just listening, that are trying to do this internally at your company, bringing in the right stakeholders across leadership, getting sales buy-in, getting finance buy-in on what metrics you're going to be measuring. If you have the ability to get board buy-in. I know that depends a lot on the size of the company and sort of your marketing relationship to board members, but I think there's a lot of pre-planning to be done up front from a change management standpoint, and that took me some time to realize. It's easy to say now, 5 years in at Refine Labs, that this is what you should be doing, but my first few companies, and shout out if you're listening, we learned a little bit of trial and error as we go, and figured out how to showcase, like, is it working or not, through what we call split the funnel. Just one more vault plug here, but really looking at the maybe your previous strategy, your low intent, a more lead gen focused strategy, and comparing that to your high intent conversion point, and just seeing how they're converting through the funnel, and very commonly seeing that things convert at like lower than 2% from lead to closed on revenue from a low intent strategy, and that's like closer to 20 to 30% on average with a high intent. And so I think that's been probably the biggest learning throughout it all, is just how to approach it, and how to do it in a bite-sized fashion.
Through every market change, every macro factor, there's been a lot since this journey of 2020 to now. So I appreciate you kind of sharing that.
Yeah, it's so important. And Megan has talked a lot about that change management piece recently, this year especially. And I think it's so easy, like we were talking about earlier, when you can see the big picture. You are at 10,000 feet, seeing all of these patterns and seeing it fail from company to company to company. And it's not enough for you to just say, trust me, it works. Just trust me, right? That's not enough for an entire organization to change their mindset. And so even if that's frustrating from your perspective, having those smaller bite-sized changes, or a really strong change management leader, is crucial to, yeah. So let's do the flip side of biggest failure, lowest point. What has this taught you to appreciate about yourself? What have you learned about yourself as a marketer or as a person through this whole journey?
Yeah. I think probably the first thing is just, like, early on in my career, I didn't trust my instincts a lot. I sort of assumed that I was wrong, that people that had done this for longer than me were act better. They knew what they were doing. I should follow what they'd been doing, and did some things that at the time, like, I don't know, this doesn't feel like it's probably the right move, but boy, is it trackable. Let's do this. And I think, the experience of seeing the measurement be done incorrectly, measuring the wrong things, growing from that, made me realize, like, actually some of these instincts I had 10 years ago were accurate, but I was in my early 20s and didn't feel like I knew what I was talking about at all. So I think that's been maybe something that just comes with time as you mature into your career, but definitely something that I noticed with my shift in companies and shift in strategy. And I think, more so being here, I think this entire journey from, I'll call it a measurement journey, has really improved my ability to articulate the same thing to different people in different ways. Like, I'm making the same point, but it may not be received by this individual in the same way that it will be received by this individual. And it's kind of like the hardest part of client work, and the beauty of client work as well is, you know, tailoring your approach to who's on the other end and receiving that message. And that's like, I think, invaluable in your career outside of just this, and is something that, and, you know, outside my career with my family, talking to my husband, all of those, all of the communication that you do in your life, I think is really important to think about how you're tweaking your approach depending on who's receiving that message.
Yeah.
Nailed it. It's like those team projects in high school. I failed those because I did not know how to like communicate when somebody just was like, I'm like, just do it. But now, you know, as you kind of evolve and you're like, okay, I have to learn, and it is a skill set, but maybe they
And
were trying to teach us something.
I was the person that just like did the whole project in high school.
Same.
Like, you guys aren't going to do it the way I want to do it.
All
It's
right, you
good
two
enough.
show offs.
I'm doing it.
I'm just
Like
gonna
the
have to
terrible-
redo it anyway if you do
terrible
it
stuff.
wrong. So
So I just hope to be grouped with either of you then. That was like the dream scenario for me. It's like, oh, well, let me know how I can help.
me and Judy on a team though, either like the best or a disaster.
Right? You're both like, oh, Steph's got it. I don't even need to try. Yeah. Yeah. Steph, I can see that. That makes a lot of sense with your personality. And I also feel like there's something about that personality type, and also why we both really like trivia. I don't know what it is.
And I'm terrible at trivia. So just calling myself out here right and left for the listeners
We're
this week.
seeing all the connections. We're seeing
Yeah.
it come together.
I'm learning a lot about myself during this journey. So thank you, Judy. But awesome. Well, let's pivot a little bit. I really appreciate you walking us through that. I think that it's just always, again, I keep saying this, but fascinating to understand that people's past to different components, and just like the nuances that come with each of those different milestones. So kind of taking a shift to thinking about what's next in marketing. So it's a big question, it's a loaded question, but what do you really anticipate is coming up, and how do you think listeners should prepare for that? Or how do you think maybe marketers entering the field now should start thinking differently or challenging themselves?
Yeah. I had to think about this one for a bit because I'm like, I don't know, you know, there's always these newsletters or posts. It's like the newest thing in marketing, the top thing, like what's new, what's coming. And I actually think this is a little bit of a divisive opinion, but I think we're potentially going to over-index too much into AI. I think it's already starting in the like, I don't know. I just updated my iPad and there's a new like AI playground app that came here for generating images, but I like could not get the image I wanted of this is for my 3-year-old son. I couldn't get it to be a crocodile, a dinosaur, and a raccoon. It would only give me a crocodile and then a raccoon slash dinosaur like morphed together. And I was just like, this robot is just not understanding what my 3-year-old son wants. And I think I'm going to see more of that coming out in marketing, especially companies that are not investing into like good talent to harness the AI piece. I think you can see it when somebody copies and pastes from ChatGPT, the way it's bolded, the way it has its bullet points, or it's numbered, the way it's summarized. Sort of, I think if you look at it enough, you can hear the tone of voice that ChatGPT or other AIs come with. And so I think companies actually like, you need to learn AI, know AI, figure out how it can help with the like tactical tasks, removing some of the grunt work or the time spent. But actually, I think you need to like invest more in understanding your ICP, the human touch, kind of connecting back to the humanity of it, because I think it's going to end up like potentially robots talking to robots. And what's really going to sell is people talking to people. You can quote more.
I love it. Well, anybody that can put together a dinosaur, a raccoon, and a crocodile, Judy is your #1 customer. So just slide into her DMs. Sorry, Judy, but I got to see this.
Same.
This will be the art of this episode. Yeah, no, I think you're spot on though, the over reliance. And I think it's such a helpful tool. So as we think about like the future of marketing, AI is the driver for us decision making and moving quickly, and it should be able to synthesize and help improve how we are executing tasks. So especially busy work, right? So I'm the first user to like speak into ChatGPT when I'm like having a brain dump on an idea or trying to think through some things, or it's just like more of a basic like task oriented that I'm getting myself around. But when people are using it for every newsletter starting to sound the same, or everything on their website starting to sound the same, I think you're absolutely nailing that. And that's one thing that we should all kind of take a step back and reflect on, is that it doesn't have to sound perfect, and nor should it ever sound perfect. So appreciate that.
Yeah. Judy, thank you so much for coming on with us. Thank you for sharing your journey and your insights. We're really grateful for your time, and we hope everyone listening will start to trust your instincts, keep tailoring your message to the audience in front of you, and streamline your dashboards. If you like hearing these journeys, make sure to subscribe and share this episode out to your network. And if you want to nominate a marketing hero to come on and chat with us, feel free to get in touch. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see y'all next time.
Thank you.